Hi, I'm Catherine Caroli. I wanted to talk about a way to work on Brahms 4 in preparation for auditions. So all of these excerpts become very, very different pieces of music when we're playing them for auditions than when we're playing them in the orchestra. Of course, it's really important to remember the context in which they come. But in terms of how to perform them, I find different challenges depending on whether it's for an audition or for a concert performance. I think the first thing that's most critical about the Brahms 4 excerpt is finding a tempo which works. Oftentimes I hear this played far too slowly. So if I take out my metronome and just play the solo and try to establish a moving tempo here, I may end up with something like this. That's 69. That felt a little bit slow to me. I'll try 72. Seems like a more reasonable tempo. I think what's important about taking auditions and tempos is that you're neither too fast nor too slow, that you find a good medium tempo in which the music can sound effective and controlled. So given that, I've got my goal tempo, which is really important. I want to keep that tempo in mind when I start the excerpt here. And for sure here. Now, having said that, there can be some variation in tempo. I would take a little bit of time into the solo. I also would take a little bit of time at the very end. But overall, it's important to keep the tempo right about there. So, moving on. At the very opening, I find this really difficult for most people to be able to control both the articulation and the dynamics that are written. Keep in mind that the C sharp in the second bar is really the end of the diminuendo and not a separate thing. Also, the dots with the slur are sort of a portamento type feeling. They should have a very quick taper on them, not be completely detached, but sort of long with the release. It's also important to have some rubato. The note shouldn't sound mechanical. So I'm moving a little bit towards the middle. Now, as far as the scale goes, it's important to start softly. However, I find it difficult to start pianissimo and make a diminuendo all the way into the solo. So I do a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of crescendo in the middle of the scale so that I can really make a diminuendo the bar before the solo starts. Now, two really important things about the solo. Number one, the vibrato has to be there on the third quarter note of every bar. This is where the tenuto, the peak of the crescendo is. So oftentimes I'll hear vibrato on the resolution, but not the appoggiatura. And I would say the resolution could be played almost without vibrato. Second thing, it's really important not to clip that resolution. The rest is actually quite short. And if you practice this excerpt without thinking of rest at all, but just little commas to breathe and otherwise sustained, I think you get the right sort of feeling. Etc. So I would encourage you to think about the rest that way. Another really important thing is to make sure that the ending dynamic of your resolution, so in the first measure that would be the G before the rest, is exactly identical to the start of the E after the rest. So if you end at pianissimo, you are starting that E at pianissimo, so that you get a real connection of the phrase over the rest. Another way that I like to practice this is to think of, instead of thinking ba, ba, da, ba, dum, I only think about where the horns play. So the horns play on beat 2, 4, and 6. So I'd be thinking bum, ba, dum, ba, da, da, And it will really, really change the way that you feel this excerpt. When we get to the third measure of the solo, where there's no hairpin written, I actually like to change the color and play pianissimo subito there. I think it makes for something nice in the harmony. The next few measures should be all about making that gradual crescendo up to the high F sharp, which I think you should definitely play with your middle finger. So once you get to the high F sharp, I don't think the peak of the excerpt is over. If you were to listen to the harmony in the Passacaglia theme, you'll notice it's actually the next measure that has the most tension. So I think it's important to carry the forte from the F sharp all the way into the next downbeat. To that note there. At that point then, you can start making a general diminuendo. I would caution you in measure 103 to make too much crescendo down into those low notes. They still need to sound beautiful and round. I think the crescendo might be there partly to make sure that your low register still sounds beautiful and that you're projecting, but not any super big deal. Be careful of the vibrato in this last measure. It tends to get very wide down low, and I think instead it should be a narrow vibrato and very much enveloped in the sound. Last comment about this excerpt, I don't breathe before the very last note. I like it to be a continuation of the diminuendo so it doesn't stick out. So I hope that's helpful, and as always, let me know if you have any questions or requests. CatherineCaroli@gmail.com.